Welcome to our showcase interview with music consultant, DJ and presenter Paul Hanford. We're going to chat to Paul about his career and get some tips and advice on how to survive the terrain of the music business. Paul has worked with some of the UK's most forward-thinking and acclaimed events, artists, PR companies, film and arts organisations, including the BFI, Coco, Laura Marling, Secret Cinema, Topshop, the Wilderness Festival and much more. Paul is also the music expert on London Live and co-hosts Pop, Dalston's biggest indie night. He also recently hosted a talk at the Library in London entitled Better Living Through Music, which is a light-hearted, irreverent talk on how hand-to-mouth can become an empowering and liberating mantra for life. What an introduction.
Hey.
Hey Paul. So, listen, thanks for taking the time to talk to Music Match magazine today.
My pleasure.
We want to start at the beginning and ask what inspired you to want to work in the music and creative industries. Was there an early project or exposure to something that kick-started your love for it?
I think it's about not being able to do anything else, really. I think being a creative person is a little bit like being a mathematical person, or it's about it's very much your skin, so it's about finding a pathway where you can actually be yourself and you can explore what you're actually good at, rather than finding that you're kind of maybe perhaps compromised into a life that isn't really blossoming to
Or
you.
fulfilling for you?
Yeah, exactly.
So
yeah.
was it, your parents, were they particularly musical, or was it your, just at school you discovered you just had a real love for it, or was it always there?
I think my parents were always very respectful that I could explore. I have very early memory of my mum putting on Neil Diamond, and it just sounding really awesome. We're having a big old stereo and listening to the Beatles and ELO and things like that. So music was always on in my house when I grew up with my parents, and so it was always something that I remember making radio shows when I was little by just kind of putting my headphones on and making little tapes, it's always been in my background, perhaps more so than at school. School was more of a formality that you had to endure until you could go away and not go to school.
Did you find, so I was going to ask you, did education play a part in your career choice, or was it
Later on,
but sort of primary school, high school was kind of a little bit more stifling? There wasn't really...
it was a stifling school. I think people have different options, but back in the 18th century when I went to school, it was very much like you had to just memorize information. So I think partly in a way it was a kind of a counteraction. I think part of the thing that music always inspired to me, and punk rock and pop music, which are my big things, are that it's a counteraction to everything like that. So if you feel oppressed at school or at work, you have music as a reaction against it. So in a way you kind of educate yourself through the music magazines and through pop music and through radio, and through that an alternative world that can be a rich and fulfilling route to freedom for many people.
And did you find it that it kind of sparked a rebellion in you?
Absolutely, but it wasn't a rebellion as in throwing bricks at policemen or anything.
No.
It was a rebellion of just expression and freedom.
Yeah, and I suppose like-minded people, like songs
exactly.
and music that spoke to you particularly, or what you were dealing with growing up, or whatever it might be.
Absolutely, and as soon as I found music, I also found friends that I still have now. It's like you come together, you share music together, and it creates your future. It creates children.
Yeah, absolutely. So, at uni, is that when you first started exploring being a DJ and being a producer?
Yes, at university, I kind of got a job as a DJ in the student union, really, just basically playing Fool's Gold, quite a lot, maybe Like a Prayer as well. And then
what a tune!
Exactly. What a back-to-back tune.
I know, that's
really,
quite
isn't it?
a double whammy. Yeah.
Totally. It kind of grew up through that. We grew up for the encouragement of just trying something, finding that you actually could get away with it, being asked to do it again, and then you look around and see what more you can do, how you can expand on that, and it's kind of rolled since then, really.
So did you, when you first started DJing, were you DJing with vinyl?
I was DJing with vinyl, I was DJing with CDs, I was DJing even with tapes as well.
Right.
It was whatever you can get your hands on, really.
But who taught you that? Did you learn it yourself? Did you just pick it up?
It was a mixture of things, really. You're always learning. I think as a DJ, a good DJ never stops learning, really. And a lot of that is just from watching other DJs. I remember the person that ran the student union gave me a very quick 20-minute overview on how to use the equipment. And then from there you go, really. I think you learn from the audience, really, as much as anything else. You learn how people react to you, really.
Yeah, and your choices.
Yeah.
So that was your first gig at the Student Union.
Yeah.
The first ever gig, how did it go?
I cannot remember. I think it was amazing in my head. I don't know if anyone else will see it that way. I played, obviously, the Stone Roses and Like a Prayer. Yeah. And if you love Fool's Gold and if you love Like a Prayer, it was probably very good for at least 15 minutes.
Brilliant. Good. Well, okay. So this leads me to the next question, which is, what was your weirdest, most abstract situation you've ever been in, career-wise? So that's either as a DJ, musician, producer, whatever.
I can tell you this. It was a band I was in called Brothers in Sound, who were signed to Parlophone in the late 90s. We got to do a Christmas party at the Fortress in Islington, and it was very much when Shoreditch was just becoming the area it is now. And we were on stage doing our show, but before we went on, the promoter said, you're going to be playing with 15 dwarves and we want you to sing Feed the World. And we were thrown into this. The dwarves didn't know what they were doing. We were looking at the dwarves going, do you know the song? And they were looking at us going, no, we don't, we're dwarves. Just because we're dwarves, we don't know Feed the World. But we kind of got through it somehow. But it was very, very, very bizarre.
And that was when you were signed. So
we were signed.
Presumably you would have had representation, you would have had people.
This was our PR people that got us the gig.
Right. So they were like, they was representation.
Yeah.
So it's good. So you were signed to a record label.
Yeah.
What was that experience like?
It was fantastic. It was really eye-opening. I got together with two very good friends of mine, still very good friends of mine, and we made some music over a weekend. We were very surprised at how listenable it was. We were just experimenting, and so we sent it off to some labels, didn't think anything of it, and we had 9 labels chasing us, and we went with Parlophone because of the Beatles, really, and we had an amazing time. They were very good to us. We weren't really ready as a band, really, because we just threw ourselves in, so we basically had 3 years of running with this idea, going, oh my god, we need to write some more tunes, constantly. But we got to record with the Chemical Brothers, we got to tour, we got to explore that lifestyle, really, and when it ended, it was just, it
was a great experience.
Yeah.
So it's a total baptism of fire as well.
Absolutely.
I guess it's so interesting that you say that there now, where you had 9 labels hankering over you, because it's just unimaginable now that a bidding war like that would happen, because there's so many other elements involved now. I mean, obviously this was before the advent of social media, and you need to have 100,000 followers before a label will even look at you. So you have to do all that legwork. I mean, I suppose because it was unknown terrain to you back then. Do you feel kind of lucky to have?
I feel very honoured.
Experience?
Yeah, because we were on the cusp. We were right between digital and print, so we kind of sort of fell in the late 90s, early 2000s between the two things. So we would get good reviews in both print and online, and online we're just like, who looks at the internet?
What's the Tinderware?
It's never going to catch on, kids. And but it was funny how it kind of went like that. Also, the amount of money invested in us was ridiculous for an experimental indie pop band, really.
How similar to Kill Your Friends was it?
Oh no, I can't really say for legal reasons.
Good answer. Okay, so obviously your career is still in full swing, but what's your highlight of your career so far?
There's been so many, really, and of course, this interview.
Of course, well answered.
But I don't. There's been so many. I'm very fortunate that every few months there seems to be something else that blows it out of the water. I don't really retain that kind of information, to be honest with you. I'm always working on whatever's next. Really, I think
constantly evolving.
Totally, and I think that is for me that's a very important thing. It's nice to have like a little reminisce sometimes with friends about work that you've done, but the emphasis has always got to be on what's next. My heart is put into the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, I think having heard your shows and watched how you interact with musicians and bands, I think what sets you apart, because you're not a critic, you're somebody who's actually lived through it. You're a musician and a producer. You're somebody who's gone through the whole process. So I think that's why, when I've heard you interview bands, they relate to you so much, because you know what you're talking about, but it's in a very appreciative way, in a respectful way. So I was going to ask you now, because your show's influential, and you're interviewing up and coming bands who are like on the cusp of breaking into bigger and better things. How do you go about discovering new music? Do you have one particular thing that you always look for, or?
I'd say a good amount of flat white, a good cafe with light, decent Wi-Fi, then you just go to work. I'm very lucky to have really good contacts, really good relationships with people at some of my favourite labels that when I was a kid, they still make me happy. But like I pinch myself if I believe that like every week I'll be speaking with these labels and speaking as much about what we cooked at the weekend as putting out music, and then it all informs one thing. But there were certain sources that I always go to find new music. I think. For me, I always check Pitchfork, I always check the blogs, I always, it's always very important to kind of like look for new blogs as well, just find new information, just keep on Twitter, keep on social media.
Yeah, I mean, Twitter's a great outlet for it, isn't it? Because you can just follow somebody that you like and respect, whether it's a journalist or a fellow musician, because I often find the way that we sort of discover new music is from Twitter. Is like we follow a producer or an artist that we like, and they'll tweet about an artist, and then you go and discover them, and then it's that kind of spiral effect, and it doesn't feel as contrived or as pressured, because you know that this person you respect, so even if you're not going to fall in love with it, you'll still be interested in hearing it.
Absolutely. I think there's this real sense now that you only need to really promote stuff that you really love. Really, like everything I have on my show is stuff that I find really interesting as music. I do get offers to promote artists that I'm not so keen on. They might be nice, it might just not be
your
my thing. But everyone I have on is someone that I get excited about.
Yeah. Great. So what advice would you give to gigging DJs in order to raise their profile? I mean, is it networking, contacts, social media, or just a passion for it all?
I think a passion for it all. I think working really hard. I think one of the most important lessons I learned before is just about attitude, really. It's like you can either be one of the people having a cigarette outside complaining about why something doesn't work, or you just go and do it anyway. It's the show's got to go. The show's going to go on with or without you, so you might as well take control of the show. Really.
And do you find, because I think the bands and artists that I probably respect the most personally are the bands and artists that have done the playing to a old man and a dog in a pub, and not having a sound engineer, not having money, not getting paid for a gig, but just going out and learning their craft. Do you feel like that's a real recipe for success? You can't expect to be Beyonce in a day.
No, I think everything's got to be given time. This is one thing that happened with the band I was in, actually, we didn't do, was that we didn't go out and earn our way as a touring band. And I think what's good about doing that is it strengthens you, and you build up a back catalogue. You find out actually what your real sound is. It's like the kind of way, it's like as people, it's the same as how you are as a person. You may think, it might take you a while to realise who you actually really are, compared to like when I was younger, maybe I wanted to be Tom Selleck. I don't even have a Magnum shirt, it's terrible. I can't grow a moustache like that.
What bands and musicians and DJs are on your radar at the moment? Who stands out at the moment?
Who stands out at the moment? This is a tough question. There's just so much, really, and it's one of those things. It's like naming things off the top of my head, but who is really good? Who is really good? You might have to slightly cut this bit whilst I think of.
Well, I remember just sparking memory. You had an artist on your show a couple of months back called Blue Eyes.
Yes.
Who I thought was pretty extraordinary, and she was one of those people that I felt had that something. She was a lovely person, but she had something about her. And then, having met her in person and heard you interview her and listened to her music, it kind of resonated more with me, I think. Do you find that? Sometimes obviously you get sent loads of demos, but then after you've interviewed them, does that dictate how you feel about them as a musician?
It's a weird one. I think, to be honest, I think it's very transparent, really. Like answering your original question there's a band called Ulrika Spacek, which I absolutely love at the moment, and they make very kind of cosmic krautrock, very psychedelic space music, and as people they're very spacey as people. So I think
there's an authenticity.
There's an authenticity, and I think that's very good. As well, Blue Eyes, who's fantastic as well. Who's put a single out recently on Kitsune. She's very transparently the person that she makes music as, really. I think that's a sign of a good artist. Whatever style it is, it's just letting the music flow through you. So it doesn't matter if you're nervous in interviews. It doesn't matter if you're really confident in interviews, so long as that's true to who you are, really.
Yeah, and you get a feel for that in music. Absolutely.
There shouldn't be a pressure on an artist to sort of like feel uber confident and straight-laced in interviews because you just go with who you are.
Also, it's less interesting.
It is.
You know, I think
we want to see the people, don't we? We want to see the real people.
Yeah, vulnerability can be as interesting as confidence and aggression and everything else. Really. I mean, something that people like Kanye West don't have.
Totally.
But
he does something else in a fantastic way.
Well, this is it. Well,
I'm not sure what that is.
I'm not sure either. No. Bravado.
I think so. Yeah. A Twitter account.
And Twitter account. Yeah. Keeps us all entertained on the Twitter sphere. What's the best bit of advice you've ever been given?
There's the old classic fake it to make it, but I think that's been used by far too many TED Talks now for me to reiterate. But I bet my friend Tom, who's a filmmaker, when I first moved to fashionable East London about 9 years ago, told me to just say what you are. Like at the time I was a musician, and if someone said to me like, what are you? And I'd go, I'm kind of a musician. No one's going to believe you're a musician. People don't have time to question the authenticity of what you're saying. So if you're a musician and someone asks you who you are, just say, I'm a musician. And that's how you'll be known.
Yeah.
You know, you become that, and it gives you having people say, oh, okay, you're a musician, gives you the confidence to be more the musician you are. It pushes you forward. It puts you in with the right crowd. It orientates you. You know, don't be hesitant. Just go for it. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, and the final question. You gave a talk recently at the Library London called Better Living Through Music. Which was a light-hearted, irreverent talk about how you work as a creative and how to kind of survive that. Talk us through that. What was the ethos of that?
The idea is that it can be quite hard living in a city or anywhere really as a creative, and when you don't have the kind of assurance of having a salary, a lot of people are put off from kind of making the jump from what they're maybe even trained at university or they've always wanted to do because of the uncertainty of how do you pay the bills every month. So the idea of the talk was to kind of sort of, not in too much of a serious way, look at ways that leading a life of hand-to-mouth uncertainty can actually be a very beneficial thing once you get rid of certain anxieties towards how you make ends reach, really. So it was more of it was a kind of a forum that also became a forum for other creative freelancers to sort of talk about like things that have helped them and things that have maybe helped them
and just
back.
Pass on advice and wisdom. So
for example, what I just talked about just now about like saying what you are was one of them as well.
Yeah, and it's a small thing that people don't think about.
Exactly, it's the small tiny little details. Sometimes you overlook the tiny little details because you're looking towards the big picture, but the actual truth is that all of the little details collectively make the big picture together.
Brilliant. Well, on that note, I just want to thank you so much for talking to us today, Paul. And hopefully our users will benefit from your advice and your wisdom.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much
indeed.
Today. Cheers. Thank you.